The special meeting of the Socorro ISD Board of Trustees will come to order. The date is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. The time is 5:33, and we've confirmed a quorum. Please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Continuing with our agenda, we do have public comment for agenda items only. Before continuing with public comment, each person who signed up was provided a copy of the Open Forum Basic Rules and advised when they signed up that policy BED applies to the process. Please respect the process during your presentation. Remember, each speaker is allowed 3 minutes. We will proceed to open forum. Our first speaker is Dr. Carmen Olivas-Graham, please.
Good evening, Mr. Nájera, President Nájera, esteemed board members, and Dr. Carmen. As a longtime employee of the Socorro School District, I'm here to share my personal observations regarding the fund balance. Starting with the board meeting on March 2022, recommendations were made for expenses that clearly burdened the budget, and they were not essential to function and continued on. For example, hiring a more expensive and, in my personal opinion, less effective law firm that exceeded cost over $1 million. Other huge expenses such as the SEC turf, the hiring an architect firm, window replacement, multipurpose room, bathrooms and fountains, more police funding, and other expenses that could have possibly waited for a bond approval. Now I seriously doubt that a bond approval would happen with employees and community questioning fiscal accountability. The technology went from Tyler to Skyward practically overnight at the worst possible time, and many are still struggling with the system. Better planning was needed to determine if both students and financial functions required change. Regarding the academies, was there an analysis conducted on the funds needed, or was this done from 1 month to the next with no cost anticipation? I'm sure remodeling to accommodate academies was a huge expense. If these were intended to increase enrollment, look at the numbers, because I don't see the return on the investment with current lower enrollment figures. But the program evaluator might have, that we've had for the past 2 years, may have answers to these programs. Moving salary increases to unaffordable levels, coupled with mid-year reclassifications for some top administrators, along with others created positions, also had a negative impact on the fund balance. In the past, I worked in HR, and the health plan and insurance we offer at SISD is a great recruitment tool that I still use when I invite people to join our district, which I do often. It would not be fair to change from a high-quality self-funded medical plan to a nominal insurance without analyzing that there were expenditures brought to the district which may now impact employees. Moving forward, we need the board to figure out how to work with existing insurance plan that benefits employees and their families. While I realize that some of you currently on the board were not active participants at that time, many of us do applaud and thank you for answering the call to serve. Taxpayers and employees trust that you will employ strategies to reestablish a healthy fund balance. In closing, I sincerely doubt that given the current conditions, a bond at this time would gain traction. But a medical plan should not be on the chopping block. Thank you for your time. I spoke very quickly because I didn't want to be thrown out.
Thank you, Dr. Graham. All right, Dr. Graham was our only speaker. We'll continue with item number 4, the workshop fund balance presentation. Ms. Perez.
Good evening, Board President, members of the board, Dr. Carmen. My name is Vicki Perez, Chief Financial Officer. In November 15th, we talked about the strategic plan for 3C. We talked about a 5-year fund balance plan. When we talked about that, we were looking at the audit and we saw that it was definitely declining. And so I thought that was the perfect time that we could start talking about this so that we can move forward with a proactive plan. So tonight we're going to talk about several things. The first is going to be, what is fund balance? And this is not to insult anybody's intelligence. This is more to make sure that everybody is understanding what fund balance is, what it's for, what it's not for, how do we get there, how do we calculate, and all that other good stuff. And if at any point you have questions on any of those, please do feel free to ask. We'll also talk about how we got to this point and what we're going to do to move forward from here. Please understand that this will be the first of many meetings because as part of the strategic plan, we will need to talk about what we're also going to do for that 5-year plan. Which steps are we going to take? So this is just going to be part 1 of this. So fund balance, without going over every single piece of this, is a measure of financial resources. How much do we have to cover our expenses? And this is only for local funds being Fund 199. So when you see that on your paperwork or anything that has the numbers, if it's a 199, that is our local funds. So depending on what we are spending and what we are receiving, our revenues and expenditures, that's going to determine what your fund balance requirements are at any given point. So if your expenses are a little bit lower, you're going to need less for those 60 days on hand. And I'll show you those formulas in a bit. We do have a local policy adopted by the board, and it does say that we have to have 75 days of operating expenditures and that it should not exceed 105 days. This is for specifically 199. If we have more than 105 days, then we will come up with a plan on how to spend that down. We currently are not abiding by the 75 days, and that's why I think it's very important that we come up with a very viable plan that we can attain within the next 5 years. Now, when you look at the audit, there are several different types of fund balance, and I want to make sure that these are understandable. So I've highlighted the keywords. The first one is a non-spendable. So those are inventories. We can't spend that because that's what we have in place in our inventories for future use. There is a restricted fund balance. Those are funds that are specifically for federal and state programs. There are committed funds. These are to be used for specific purposes. I have been at districts where they commit X amount of dollars because they would like to build a gymnasium. They want to commit so that they can build something specific. It is within the board's discretion to commit those funds. There are also assigned fund balances, and they are for specific purposes, and that is also at the discretion of the board. And then there are unassigned fund balances. These are the leftovers from the previous year. So this is the result of how much revenues and how much expenses we've had. So if we've had more revenue than expenses, then we will add to our fund balance. If we had more expenses than we got revenues, then that will take away from our fund balance. So whenever we talk about fund balance, we will specifically talk about unassigned fund balance. So fund balance is intended for, these are very specific, like recovering from extreme events, and that could be COVID. If there was a natural disaster, if a hurricane blew in, a tornado blew in today and blew away one of our campuses, do we have enough to maintain or rebuild that campus? Those are true emergencies. Economic factors such as recession and COVID, and now the COVID slide that we're going to have after ESSER is gone. Any unforeseen purchases. This one, a very specific example is we had some theft. I won't say where, but now we have to do extra measures on security to make sure that we're taking care of that and we're taking care of our assets. That was not something that we planned on. And then if we are planning purchases, like I said, that a previous district, they planned on having a gymnasium. So they knew that over the next 4 or 5 years, they were going to assign fund balance so that they can build a $3 million facility or a different kind of buildings. If it's a planned item, then that is definitely something that we can do with fund balance. So it is not intended for recurring expenses such as payroll maintaining insurances, and sustaining programs. It is not a savings account, so it's not something that we can just put away into our unassigned. If we are saving it, it's going to go into assigned, and it's going to have a specific reason. It's going to be board approved, and there will be a resolution that says what we're going to use that for. And it is certainly not a rainy day fund. And the difference between a rainy day fund and a fund balance is in our own personal lives. If I got a speeding ticket, that is going to be a small expense that I'm going to have to take out of my regular rainy day fund. If I had a tornado blow over my house, that is not going to be taken care of by a rainy day fund. So it's just a difference in the mentality of what an emergency is. So for this year, these numbers I got from the audit, and this is going to show you how we calculated fund balance. The total expenses that we got from 199 was $477.6 million. You divide that by 365 days, and it takes $1.3 million to operate 1 day. Our current unassigned fund balance, not including assigned, committed, non-spendable, not including those, just unassigned fund balance is 72.9. Now, if we divide how much it costs to operate 1 day, we currently have 55.78 days. Now, that's a big difference from what it was last year, but there were different circumstances last year, and it's different every single year, so the cash on hand does vary from 1 year to another. Days on hand, cash on hand, those are interchangeable terms. Last year, we had $432.5 million. That gave us $1.1 million to operate in a day for 1 day. With 96.6 in our unassigned fund balance, that gave us 81.53 days of fund balance that we could operating days on hand, excuse me. Any questions about how daily fund balance is calculated?
Ms. Perez, is that just like, is there a certain date? Is that as of today? Was that calculated as at the beginning of the school year, end of school year, mid, for both of those?
That's a great question. The fund balance is only calculated as of the end of the fiscal year and by the auditor. So all of the ending entries, all of the closing entries and accruals and whatnot, those are all accounted for, and then they take that into consideration. So these numbers are specifically from the 23 audit, and you can find those numbers on Schedule C1. And I will be more than happy to share the references that I have so that you can see those. And if you have additional questions, we can meet one-on-one and discuss those. So this is as of year end.
I do have a question. So with that, as a board, we can't receive a quarterly update as far as how we're doing based on things that we are approving. That way we know how the final impact, because I think the only time we've seen it is after an audit. And in this case, this is the first time I've seen it for the past 2 years.
So are you asking specifically for an update on cash on hand or the spending?
Projected fund balance, because I think that's what today's message is how do we make sure that we're balancing that? So
Right.
on a checkbook, you kind of, not guesstimate, but you're forecasting things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that you could give us a forecast quarterly as we're making decisions? That way, those decisions, we know what the impact would be.
So we can give you an estimate, but that's exactly what it is. It's an estimate, and it will vary from 1 month to another because every month is different. We do have cash flows that the accountants work on to make sure that our cash flow is still anticipated correctly from month to month, and that's what tells us, okay, we're gonna have, X amount this month, but not this month, and those vary. Again, we do not get a state payment in August, and we do not get a state payment in April. We get extra revenues in January, February, March because of taxes, but so it kind of makes it vary a lot. So we can definitely give you a quarterly update, but it's not gonna be the true number.
Correct, and you could put, like I said, all the intricacies in there, but it gives us, again, an informed metric to make or, approve or decline decisions. It helps us make informed decisions versus just guessing.
So additionally, the financial committee meetings, the finance committee meetings, those do give the finance reports as of that month end. It counts all of the expenditures, the revenues, And it does give a percentage of how much is spent in each function in 199. So you can see, like, as of this point, we have received 50% of our revenues, but we've spent 30% of expenditures. And I can come up with a report so that it's easy to see on a monthly basis, and we can send it out through board packet. That way you can follow along, and if you have questions, you can let me know. Does that?
And just like you mentioned at the beginning, is that it's not that you're dumbing it down or saying that we don't know, but you're teaching. You're consistently teaching that way as we're making decisions, we're making informed decisions. So the
Absolutely.
more that you could give us that's consumable for all, then it helps all of us, administration along with the board, move forward.
So when we do the finance committee meetings and the minutes, when we send those out, I can give a summary of the finances as well, if that will help.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Pettis?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
At this time, do we have any funds that are committed or assigned?
Yes, we do have some committed funds that we're reviewing. At the end of the fiscal year, the auditors did recommend that we review some of the committed funds that were for E-rate. And so, Alice, I haven't told her this, but we are going to discuss what, which one of those need to be uncommitted so that it can go back to unassigned. And it will increase the days on hand, but it would be unfair to uncommit something that we do have a plan for. So if it was committed, there's more than likely a board resolution that goes with it, so we can go back and review that. And I want to say it was like 7 years.
And the assigned?
I don't believe that there's a significant amount in assigned, and I can get that number for you. I can look at the audit to see.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So the requirements for fund balance are different, varying on who you're asking. TEA says that we should have 90 days of operation to receive the full points, and that's the points that we get on the first report that we did in, I believe, November. The GFOA, they're the ones that certify our audit. Our audit is not just submitted to TEA, we also submit it to the GFOA, and that is above and beyond, and so they go in more and review all the other details that we've added to it, and their recommendation is 60 days of operation. And then, of course, as discussed earlier, CE Local says that we should have no less than 75. So how do we build fund balance? So we could decrease our spending, increase our revenues. That would take, considering we're growing, it is hard to decrease expenditures. Considering we don't have legislative initiatives, it is difficult to increase our revenues. We do have some incoming taxes. However, whenever we have increased taxes, the state revenue lowers and that equalizes. So there would have to be a different source of increasing our revenues. We could intentionally build and assign it so that we can build our 5-year plan. And we could monitor our economy, budget conservatively as we like to. And quite honestly, it's a matter of trusting in your administration that we've already gone and outsourced all the information. We do coordinate with TASBO. Moat Casey is our financial, they're our guru. They're the ones that tell us what it looks like in the forecast. They go as far as discussing oil prices. I didn't know that in the beginning, and I was like, wow. But it does have a very big impact on our school funding. And so the recommendations that we give you, please do know that we have gone through every part of our resources to get to that point. So the importance of fund balance is that it's quite honestly just good cash management. It looks good for us. It is we're being fiscally responsible, good stewards of our dollars. It eliminates the need for short-term borrowing. And what I mean by that is, God forbid that we do not have enough fund balance to cover an August. August, we don't have a TEA payment. And if we didn't have enough fund balance to cover that payroll, a payroll currently costs $30 million. If we had to borrow money just for that, at a 5% rate, we're looking at a $1.5 million interest rate that we'd have to pay back on top of the 3. If we made that payment over 3 years, we're looking at 2.4, almost double. So having enough money for those short-term needs is very important. Obviously, having fund balance is good for our support for our educational programs, lower lending rates, and it's just best practices. This is a picture from the GRP, and I know we reviewed this in November. This was as part of our audit. This is a 5-year overlook of what our fund balance looks like, and you can see on the bottom, let me see, these are the days of on hand. And so we've always been doing really well, and these are the others. Those are the ones that are assigned, committed, non-spendable. And I can send that on your Friday pack, and I can give you a detail of exactly what those were on the audit. And so now we're going to discuss how we got here. There are several factors that take into consideration here, but it will help us determine what we need to do to move forward. At this time, I will allow Dr. Carmen to take over. Dr. Carmen?
Thank you, Mrs. Pettis. Mr. Nahida, Board of Trustees, going to do a little historical perspective here, walk through some of the major factors that have led to where we are financially, some possible solutions, and then work together to move forward. One of the biggest impacts and expenditures in our budget is payroll. I'll go back to June of 2022 in a budget workshop. During that workshop, our CFO presented a 5% general pay increase, increasing our step 0 entry to be competitive for teachers to $56,900. Those two combinations were to increase the budget by $16.4 million and a proposal of a $1,000 ESSER retention payment at the cost of about $6.4 million, a total of $22.8 million, and stated that that would create a deficit budget of $19.2 million, knowing that whatever you budget, we typically don't spend 100% because we're not always 100% staffed. Following that, the next meeting 1 week later at the regular board meeting, that exact same presentation and recommendation was made, the 5% general pay increase, the salary entry for teachers moved up to $56,900, and the $1,000 ESSER retention payment. From that recommendation, what was ultimately approved was a tiered increase, 4% for some employees, 5% for others, 6% for other employees. The step 0 entry salary for teachers up to $56,900, a $2,500 ESSER retention payment, and an increase in our minimum wage from $7.25 up to $15 per hour. Based on that approval, the total financial impact, you can see on the right-hand side there in red, the raises, the increase on the teacher pay scale, $28.2 million additional in payroll for 22-23 as compared to 21-22, which is $11.8 million higher than had been recommended. That year-end audit showed a $23.6 million dip into fund balance. So again, we don't spend 100% of what is budgeted. In this case, about $4.5 million less than what was budgeted. One of the next major components that impacts our budget is our health plan design. Back to September 21st of 2021, in a special board meeting, there was consideration to approve an awarding of bids for an employee benefit consulting services. In that meeting, all the way back to September of 21, the recommendation by the purchasing director was to approve Hub International. Additionally, there was a subsequent meeting in a finance committee presentation by Hub for the initial health plan design. So that was 4 months into their work. And then in a board workshop, this is September 20th of 2022, almost exactly 1 year after Hub came in and began working, analyzing the situation, working with our benefits committee, taking consideration from that committee. Recommendation was made in that workshop regarding our high deductible plan option, resetting some costs there, adjusting the premium amounts for spousal coverage, and changing the contributions to the health savings account. That information was discussed as well a week prior to that board workshop with the HR committee, September 13th of 22. Co-pays were discussed in that meeting as well. Following the workshop and the regular board meeting, there was consideration to approve the health plan design recommendations for the 2023 plan year, exactly as presented in the workshop, resetting some costs in the high deductible plan option, adjusting premium amounts for spousal coverage, to take that responsibility off of the district, and some annual contributions for health savings account. Ultimately, what was approved in that meeting, after a year of analysis and work by HUB and our benefits committee, was to keep cost as it was in the previous year. Took the recommended reductions for employees and children on each plan. In that meeting, the HUB representative noted that would be a $2.1 million impact on what the total infusion would be from the general fund to try and keep the health plan whole. Yes, ma'am.
So teach me, why would we change providers, ask them to give us what we had before, because that's the way I'm reading it, but yet now it's 2.1 million more?
So the provider was bid out.
At whose request?
The board, back in September of 2021, hired HUB International to come in, plan a redesign. The directive was given administratively to get the costs under control because there had been an infusion from general fund into the health plan for a number of years. So all the way back to September of 2021, based on the meeting video that we viewed in the minutes, the directive was given to administration to get the costs under control. Part of that was to bid out the TPA, third-party administrator. That's really the biggest factor outside that the district does not control, whether it's Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna. What are they going to charge to administer the plan that's approved by our school district when you're self-funded? So all of that took place between September of 21, September of 22. Based on all of that, again, recommendations were made to the board. In that meeting, however, the recommendation to adjust the premium costs so that spousal coverage would be more in line with the costs so that the district was not subsidizing for non-employees was not approved. That was rejected in that meeting. And again, in that meeting on the fly, the representative from HUB noted that would be about a $2.1 million impact. So it all started back in September of 21 at the direction of the board.
The reason I ask is when I came on board, it was the time that we were approving the budget for this year. Based on the information we received, it showed that for infusion to our health fund, that it was actually going down, but that's when we had the prior provider. So that's my biggest question. Why did we change to this new third-party administrator, whatever, TPA, to get the same thing that we had before, but now there's a larger infusion? So I think that's something we need to look at. Why did we change? Get the same thing that we had before, but now we're paying more. And
so it was bid out. I don't think the cost went up, but I do have in a future slide those numbers that general fund had to transfer into the health plan design. That information is in this presentation.
okay. Yeah, because it showed that it was decreasing in the information we had received prior. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. One of the next areas that impacted the overall spending for the school district, again, comes back to payroll. In the June 19th, 2023 special board meeting, there was a presentation and the recommendation given by our chief HR officer was to provide a 2% general pay increase. Additionally, an update on the ESSER 3 budget was given in that meeting. Presentation by our director of state and federal programs discussed that ESSER 3 funding available for stipends had been depleted in the prior year. There had been $1,000 budgeted for 22-23 in ESSER 2, $1,000 per employee budgeted per employee in ESSER 3 for 23-24. Again, the previous slide, that $2,500 more per employee was spent back 1 year before this in the 22-23 school year. That was explained June 19th, 2023 in a special board meeting. Following that special board meeting, June 21st at the regular meeting, again, the compensation plan this time was brought for consideration. The recommendation from our Chief Human Resource Officer was the 2% general pay increase, which would cost approximately $6.1 million, stating in the public hearing that that would yield us about a $15.2 million deficit budget for 23-24 school year. By the end of that meeting, what was approved was a 4% general pay increase, with a cost of about $12.1 million, increasing the entry-level salary for teachers to $60,500 with a cost of approximately $4.4 million, a $1,000 retention, again, knowing there were no ESSER funds available for this, so general fund costing about $6.5 million, an increase to bus driver minimum wage at $20 per hour, with the cost of about $350,000 per year, and then adjusting years of service beyond midpoint at a cost of a little over $500,000 per year. So total cost for the district, about $23.9 million. So the total financial impact for that, the $15.2 million plus the additional $17.8 million left us sitting with a $33 million deficit. The number there did not include an estimate on fringe benefits. Typically, you'll think 12 to 15%. Excuse me. But since we have a flat rate that we contribute to healthcare, it's a range. But that $33 million anticipated deficit did not include any fringe benefit calculations. 6 months into this school year, based on what we have paid out and anticipating salaries remain the same for the remainder of the year, it looks as if we will be about $30.4 million actual higher in expenses in payroll and fringes from this year as compared to the prior year. Go back to health and pharmacy benefits. In a July 25, 2023 workshop, I had a presentation led by our Chief HR Officer. In that workshop, we discussed the basic terms, other options for health plan rates, the objectives again to the administration, starting back with September of 2021, additional access for care, the health fund status, and we discussed TRS active care as an option. In that meeting, what was discussed is if SISD consider moving over to a TRS active care primary plus, the current premium per month per employee is $455 for that plan. The state requires only that we pay $225 whether we use TRS or are self-funded, but by adding $230 to that, we will be able to provide a zero premium option for our employees who had employee only, as compared to the $575 we contribute now per month per employee. Again, that $455 would cover the premium for employee only for the TRS Active Care Primary Plus, dropping the total annual contribution from $6,900 per employee to $5,460 per employee per year, looking at approximately a monthly enrollment on average of 5,200 employees. That would total, as presented, about $28.3 million versus the current contribution of $35.8 million, a difference of about $7.5 million. This was presented in that workshop as well, this slide right here. It broke out what the district pays currently for health, including medical or health claims, pharmacy, COBRA. There's the TPA administrative fee. The three lower fees would not go away whether we're self-funded or not, but they are small really in number. And this showed a savings of $35.2 million should we go from our current plan into a TRS active care plan where we're contributing that $455 per employee. And that is accurate based on the expenditures, but that's not a true net savings. We do collect premiums from employees for spouses and children to the tune of about $15 million per year. So if you subtract that off of there, because while our expenditures would drop 35.2, the revenue would drop about 15 million, leaving us a net savings of about $20 million. Some additional considerations of significance that have impacted our fund balances are one-time plan purchases. Of course, these are not recurring. These are one-time, but they were significant. I think all are in the millions except for one. The addition of the restrooms and water fountains into the auxiliary gyms, I think 16. Returfing the campuses and SAC 1 for about $6 million. finishing out the classrooms, I think 11 classrooms at Colonel Ben Narbeth Elementary that had not been included in the bond proposal. The planning for the retrofits renovations at the elementary campuses total about $2.3 million. The Montwood High School parking lot, $1.5 million. Upgrades to our telephone system, $880,000. Technology at East Lake Middle School, $1.3 million, and some HVAC repairs for $1.4 million. So long-term impact or maybe unintended consequences here. For example, increasing the minimum wage from $7.25 to $15, more than double the cost to maintain if we have the same number of employees and the same number of hours, and we're paying them double. It makes sense that would be double the cost to the school district. Of course, overtime now, time and a half is calculated on a much larger number than it had been done previously. One way to offset some of that is to reduce the part-time staff. But one number that we thought was important to share, just to maintain the monitors and crossing guards for our campuses, resulted in a $1 million budget increase so that we have those monitors and crossing guards there for our students. And that's straight up because of the increase from $7.25 to $15. Some of the other factors, the decompression, giving the years of service above and beyond midpoint, and the raises, they're not just a one-time. They have a recurring effect because we're going to pay those every year, and a compound effect. As you increase your base salary by a larger percentage than anticipated, you give a raise based on that new larger number. So it compounds year after year. Some things that are currently taking place to help with the spending and be more efficient. We do exercise position control through regulation EEB. It gives us the ratios for staff. We have worked to change how we report our reimbursables for SHARs. We've increased those revenues, as you can see, from $2.7 to $5.3 million. The investment earned, of course, that's based on the economy, in 2023 up to $9.7 million. So far in this fiscal year, $4.1 million. And we did do some retrofitting of LED lights from fluorescent in our campuses using federal funding, the ESSER funds. And the result from that, we anticipate approximately a $2 million annual savings going forward. Additionally, we did present on Facilities Advisory Committee presented to the board on a potential bond sometime in the future. The numbers they presented included money for safety and security for the campuses, but based on a facility assessment, also included some roof work, included some HVAC, making campuses equitable, older campuses to newer, replacing buses out of bond money instead of maintenance and operations, and then some improvements on our technology infrastructure with the figures there. So I want to discuss how we can move forward together to get where we need to be financially. And here's kind of a point I want to make sure we're all very clear on. An overview of this year's local budget, our 199, our local funding. Our anticipated budget revenue is $485.2 million. In salaries out of 199, we have budgeted to pay $342.6 million. In benefits, we have $85 million budgeted, and in the health insurance transfer, we are anticipating a $4.5 million transfer over. Ms. Macias, I think we took a part of a slide out. I'm going to have to ask after I finish for Vicki to come up and give you the numbers on the transfer outs into health, and I apologize for that, but I would see it right here. But based on the 23-24 local budget, what we have budgeted, 89% of our local budget is for our employees. It's salaries, it's benefits, and they offset the transfer for the health insurance. Typically, you want to see between 70 and 80% of your budget spent on employee salaries and benefits. So we are clearly above that percentage by about 9%. Thank you, ma'am. Transfer out this year anticipated to be $4 to $4.5 million. In 2023, it was $6.5 million. 2022 was $4 million. 2021, $4.5 million. In 2018 and 2019 were the high years. It was $9 million each of those years. So 21, 22, 4.5, 4. We're back to between 4 and 4.5. 2023 was a higher year there at $6.5 million. But here's where we sit, again, with a large percentage of our local budget paying employees the benefits, the health insurance, leaving very small percentage discretionary for their maintenance and operations. Potential solutions. When you are in a deficit budget situation, I think Mrs. Pettis explained, it's pretty straightforward. You can either increase the revenue or decrease the spending, the expenditures. It would be wonderful had our state legislature looked at the excess they had, the billions of dollars they had that could have gone into public education. But I think most of us watched that play out. Those new funds were mostly tied to vouchers, and as such, no real new money of any significance was put into public education. So locally, school districts have the option to go out for a VA-TRE, a voter-approved tax rate election. We do have by statute eligible pennies that would increase the revenues into our maintenance and operation budget. We are eligible for 3 golden pennies and 9 copper pennies. Golden pennies, the state recognizes the effort there, the taxing effort there, and while your local funds are pretty consistent per penny across the board, regardless of how they're termed, the payback from the state is greater on those golden pennies. So 3 golden pennies would yield about $4.5 million in local funds, about 18.6 money coming back from the state for a total of $23.1 million. We have up to 9 copper pennies that we could take to the community to consider voting on. And your local funds and state aid are about equal there. It's about dollar for dollar. $13.3 million from local tax effort, $13.7 from the state aid, for a total of just over $27 million. So the total capacity, taxing capacity based on that, would be 12 cents. You can see the local 17.8 almost, $32.4 million in state aid. So there's the possibility by statute to increase revenue by over $50 million locally.
Quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarity for our community, if we do golden pennies and copper pennies, does this impact their tax rate at all?
Yes, ma'am.
It
This-
does impact their tax rate?
Yes, ma'am.
And I thought it didn't. I thought whenever we did the swaps that it did not impact tax rate. The way that it's written, it says that it's a tax rate increase because we're changing, but it would not impact. Just clarify that. I might be wrong.
So for the bond, because we had used defeasance and moved pennies over onto INS side, that would not constitute a tax increase other than, I think, the half cent that we had calculated. But no, ma'am, this would constitute a tax increase.
Oh, it would? Okay.
Right, so you could call for a 1 penny tax increase, divide that golden penny by 1/3, that would be the yield.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am, it would be a tax increase. Other options, as we discussed, a move from being self-funded for health insurance, which is fairly costly, to a TRS health insurance option would yield us a net savings of approximately $20 million per year. Beyond that, we have the capability to evaluate whether we maintain our current district programs, maintain salary and staffing adjustments. So under those areas, we could be considering a reduction of force or reducing number of employees through attrition. The staffing study we have ongoing with TASB, we don't have that back yet in final form, but in preliminary discussions, a lot of what they're discussing would be to save personnel costs by increasing class sizes. And I think the number they're discussing that would yield about $6 million. That's all in draft, still in discussion and being evaluated. Options could include 0 raises for all employees, pending additional state funding to balance out the budget, one-time payments if the state gives additional revenue in lieu of salary increases, so they are not recurring, or we could consider reducing back some of the minimum wage that was given that was doubled. Regarding the health insurance specifically, we are in the process of reviewing, preparing to review with our benefits committee. They are working on a side-by-side presentation for the copays, the premiums, et cetera, to present to that committee. Want to make sure that we vet it thoroughly before we consider that whether or not that is a viable option for Socorro ISD. Following that presentation with the Benefits Committee, should it go forward, we would then make it available, that presentation and the link for TRS health insurance to the full district, along with a survey to solicit feedback before we decide whether or not to make a recommendation back to the board to make a change. I will say that in some of the preliminary research, we did identify, as of September 2022, 982 employers across the state do participate in TRS Active Care. That is approximately 80% of districts in the state of Texas, including 10 of the largest 20 school districts in Texas, from Dallas ISD with 143 kids to Louisville ISD, which is similar in our size with 49,000 students. Some upcoming dates. Should, following our investigation into TRS insurance, prove viable, we would need to come to the board by the March meeting to give TRS adequate time, adequate notice for us to be able to participate in a TRS Active Care as of September 1 of this year. And it's not written in stone that we're coming back with that recommendation, but should we make that recommendation, it would have to be done by that date. There are some board workshop dates, board meeting dates regarding finance. What is not on here, and we will need to work with the board on, are additional workshops specifically for addressing the purpose of addressing our fund balance. Right now we're talking preliminary. I feel like we should develop, and the board wants to develop, a long-term plan to ensure that our fund balance is viable and in accordance with our strategic plan, Strategic Action 4.3C. So we will be reaching out for some additional dates, but these are the dates that are on the calendar as of now. With that, we do have administration present, I think representative of all the areas that we discussed this evening. So I would like to open it up to the board for questions, input at this time.
I think you were reading some information, Dr. Carmen, that included some alarming words to me about increasing class sizes. Is that included in our PowerPoint? It was a list of information like.
No, that was on the PowerPoint. I was referencing a staffing study. We've commissioned TASB to do a staffing study for us.
Okay.
And one of the possible recommendations in there, if we want to decrease expenditures in payroll, if you're going to cut staff, there has to be some place to take it from. And one area they were discussing would be to increase class size to decrease the number of teachers through attrition. So that is not in writing yet. We don't have that final plan back from TASB yet, and we're not recommending it.
Okay.
I'm just giving that as an example of how we could reduce our expenditures for payroll.
We'll get copies of that study once it's concluded. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
What is the projected change in the fund balance at the end of this fiscal year? Was that the 23.6 million?
Back up a couple of slides before I answer that question, Mr. Castellano. All right, so the budgeted deficit, back on slide 25,
Yeah, here it is.
$33 million. That did not include fringe benefits, but that, on paper, on what is scheduled, to be about $33 million.
And this includes the bond overages and all that?
Mrs. Pettis, I don't believe that includes any bond overages, or I don't think that would be this fiscal year, but I'll let you answer that.
That's correct, sir. It does not include bond. That is a totally different fund. Fund balance only pertains to local funds, 199.
But if we go over the bond, it's going to come out of our,
Oh, yes, that will come out of local funds
yes. And
in the fiscal year that expense occurs. So it could be this year if the projects are done by June 30th, excuse me. Then it will happen in this current fiscal year. If it's
What are we
after.
looking at right now?
I don't have that number with me, sir.
Did we get that number,
Yes, sir.
or do we rely on the external audit number?
No, I'll get you the number.
26 million, was it? 24 million? I can't remember the number.
I'll get the number for you, sir.
Okay. Okay, I just want to make a comment real quick before we ask more questions. Is a lot of it is focused on the teacher salaries, and we did this, and I know there was retention bonuses, and this is to keep the teachers here working in the district. We have a lot of problems retaining our staff, but it's focused here, you know, like in red, that this is the cause of why we're going broke. We need to take care of our teachers, and if I were to ask what is the ratio of teachers per substitute and students, you know, we're leading that way, and we're outsourcing a lot. We're not at 100%, and we're still losing people. If you go the route and say, and which we're probably going to go that route and say no raises, it's going to cause teachers to even think, well, Socorro's not the place for me. I need to get out. And if you change the healthcare, you know, that is a big program for them to buy in and stay with us. It does cost us $4 million a buy-in, but it's a selling point for the district to hold our teachers here. We go TRS and say we can save the money. We're going to lose teachers. We're not going to be that golden house on the hill. When we went to, and your question, when we went from Cigna to Aetna, they told us we can reduce cost, but the coverages will remain the same. And after it kicked in, it didn't. They started coming forward and saying, well, my medication's not covered anymore. So we weren't given all the information that was required, and that's what I constantly complain about here. We're not giving all the information we need. Even if we look at TRS, we're going to shortchange our employees, and it's going to hurt us more than trying to save money here. The district needs to look more in what is nice to have and what we need to have. One of the proposals here was looking at our projects and what we have going in the district and what can we reduce. We pushed, what was it, the Capturing Kids' Hearts program. We buy a lot of programs outside the district that, okay, it helps the children, but can we afford it anymore? That we're getting to that point, you know, and we have to focus on what is important for the district. What programs do we fund and keep pushing forward? Do we need to look at outsourcing the clinic? You know, is that too much of an expenditure? I don't know. We need to look at everything. It has to be on the table for us to look at. And I'm not a quick PowerPoint here. We can't hurt the employees. We can't say, let's take back the $15 minimum because we're going to lose that many employees too. Nobody's going to come and work for us at $7 an hour anymore. When you can get 15 at McDonald's, it's going to hurt us more than move forward. We're going to go backwards. We need to find a way to where we balance what we need and make that the priority. Will we be able to get raises for teachers? Probably not this year. But we need to keep it promising and say, look, we're going to try harder and cut back in places we don't really need to make it better and keep you here. We need to show that to our employees.
Just in response to part of that statement, Mr. Castellano, at a recent Region 19 meeting with superintendents, the discussion was about no districts being able to afford to give a raise this year, and not just for teachers, but across the board. And I believe that'll be at an upcoming West Texas board training as well. Just the recommendation. It's not just Socorro ISD that's facing these challenges. The comment about the number being in red, because 89% of general fund being spent on salaries and benefits is a high percentage. Regarding programs like Capturing Kids' Hearts and other programs, most of those are federally funded, but we have looked at what is being effective, what cuts are going to have to be made. With ESSER going away, we know there are not additional funds in the general fund to move those over. So yes, we will have to be discontinuing many of those. Whether that's part of a upcoming workshop, we can certainly include that for the board to look at. That's part of what the discussion is today.
It just, yeah, the raise probably not possible, but it's a disservice to take away from them now. We got them at a point where it's a livable wage. They can work. They can come to work and say, I'm not going to choose between a burger and gas for my car or whatever. What's going to happen to my life? $15 is, a lot of us in here, well, the big salaries in here. But we need to think about the other people that we have to help because they support everything that goes on in this district. We just can't say, well, let's roll back the $15 minimum because that would hurt a lot. That would just, it would not have my support for that. We'd have to find a way around it. Okay, healthcare is not pretty anywhere you go. TRS, if we start taking away benefits, people are just going to be working to make the co-pays. And we need them to say, no, I go to work and I'm happy here. It's a good place to work. I can afford, if I do get sick, I can afford it, and not worry about the co-pay and the deductibles. We have to think about that before we move forward. The district lives on a premium. It's lived good for a long time, but now it's time to say, you know what, maybe we need to pull back the reins for a little bit and say, let's hold off and let's stabilize what's going on here. Well, everybody can't, live in the gold, but we just need to stabilize what's going on here. We need to work for that, and we need to show that to the employees and say, look, we're going to do what's best for everybody. We're not going to disregard you and just say, you know what, yeah, we can save $25 million with TRS, but you're going to pay it on the other end because you're going to have to work harder or, pick up substitute jobs or extra jobs or whatever. We can't do that to our employees. Go ahead, sir.
The one thing I do want to share is that one thing that we do owe our district, our employees, is proper planning. And the one thing that concerns me, going back to the last slide, is that possibly bringing a recommendation in March. We're already mid-January. We have heard that things happen overnight and they're big decisions for our employees that impact them, but yet proposals are brought to the board with limited information for us to decide either to be the good guys or the bad guys. So that's one of my first recommendations, is that March meeting to talk about TRS and get input from employees. To do it correctly, it's not going to be a matter of 45 days to get a good, that's one of my first recommendations, or I guess what I saw that I'm concerned of. The second piece of it is I heard increased revenue. One of the biggest pieces that Socorro has going for it is its enrollment. Right now we're in a decline. Have we looked at why are our students that are living here growing? They're building, and again, if it's still correct, 0.6 of a child comes our way with every household that is built single family home. Why aren't they coming to EP or to SISD? You guys know where I work now. So what are we doing? Do we have a plan to capture those students? Or if they're going to a charter, how are we bringing them back? How is it that we make sure that SISD is their home? Because that's our money right there. That's our increase in revenue. Those are my 2 cents.
I'm sorry. Can I just piggyback off of what Ms. Macias is saying, is that I have written the same thing here, is I understand we either decrease expenditures or increase revenue, but I think that we actively need to go to our community and reach out and talk to people and build up our district to those who have chosen to leave and make ourselves just kind of the same concept of bringing back our kids that are dropouts, but bringing them back and saying, let me educate you on the wonderful things that Socorro is doing. And we've done that historically. I know that when I was a teacher, this is something that we did, different people from every campus made it just a wonderful Saturday, and we went out and celebrated Socorro. and shared that with our community and targeted the homes of the students that we had lost and or to charter schools or other districts. And I think that, like Ms. Macia said, that is our revenue. And then we need to build up our district, and we need to sell it. We need to make it a place where people want to return. So before we start hurting our teachers and with insurance or salaries or things like that, I think we need to explore every option. The other thing, I think advocating, if I've learned anything about running for the school board and advocating at a higher level, not just a local level, but going to the state and making some noise and saying, hey, we're here and we're not going to stop, right? And our teachers deserve this. And we can't, just because the state doesn't see the value in public education, doesn't mean that we need to stop making that kind of noise. And I do applaud our unions for that. If you've taught me anything, thank you. And I have a question for the investments. Ms. Vicky, is that money that goes back into the fund balance? Like the monies that we make off of our investments, is that something that goes into or can help alleviate our deficit?
So when we plan our budget, we do anticipate a certain amount of revenues from investments.
Okay.
So anything that is over the anticipated amount would go to offset extra costs. So if there is extra revenue, that would be fund balance. If there is extra expenses on top of the revenue, then that just helps to cover that excess cost,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
And then with regards to the amount of money that is committed of the fund balance, when we were talking a minute ago, you made a comment about needing to share something with Ms. Ramos. So once, I don't know how much money that is
It's
involving.
7 million.
Okay, so will that 7 million be something that we will be made aware of before it is moved over to what is the other one? The unassigned?
In order for us to remove it from committed to unassigned or assigned to unassigned, it does have to have board action, so you will be aware of that.
Okay.
I will need to get with Alice to make sure that it's not earmarked for something in particular that is part of a grant and that it's part of a plan that was already in place. And so if it is, then it would not be wise of us to ask to put it in unassigned if the board has already earmarked it for something.
But if it's something that in our current state is something that wouldn't hurt us to not keep it in the committed, will you still bring it to the board so that
Yes,
we
ma'am.
can consider it?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That was one of the recommendations from our auditors as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess, Dr. Carmen, and I heard our enrollment has dropped. I think I heard from 300 to 500 students. Is that correct?
I'm sorry,
Our enrollment has dropped?
our enrollment has dropped this year.
How
yes.
much has it dropped?
Roughly 600.
That's a lot of students.
It is.
What we need to do is we need to find out where they're dropping, what area, what campus. Is it the elementary, middle school, high school? We need to go after those charter schools like we did in the past. We need to stand out there in front of Walmart. It's got to be grassroots. We need to bring those kids back and find out why are they leaving our district, because that's money right there for us. That's one thing that we're going to do. That's just basic and tackling. We got to go back to grassroots again, find out where we're missing these kids and why are they gone. I think back in the past when we were with Cigna years ago, I think Mara Kimona came up to us. We had a workshop and we had a 3 to 5 year plan. And I think we were saving $4 million in that plan. If I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. We got to go back right now. Instead of doing a TRS benefits committee, we got to do a committee from our healthcare plan right now. See where we're at. If we need to raise the copay, we're at 35, raise it to 45. Maybe raise another $10. How much million is that going to give us? Changing to TRS for saving $36 million for the benefit of our employees is not going to help our employees. We went through some drastic changes. I think we go back, we look at our ADA, go back, bring those kids back, do a committee, see where we're at and with our health plan right now, and start back at basics. I mean, I think changing, obviously giving our teachers a raise, that's always going to happen. We got to keep our employees. This year, we'll look at that. But going to a different health plan, well, changes that we've been doing, I don't think that's the right answer. I think we need to go back, find out our kids, see where they're at, bring that enrollment back to our school, see where we are right now and our health benefits, and go back and look at that, and maybe do a 3 to 5 year plan on that, Mark, and see where we're at. We have no idea if we're making money in our clinic. I think when it was COVID, I think we were making a lot of money, but now things went down. We got to find out where we're at. Yes, we spend a lot of money. It's either a want or a need, and we could go back and see where we're spending all this money. We don't need to do that right now, but we need to go back and how we're going to solve this. And solving is not changing TRS, saving some money. I think we just go back to basics, fix our health plan right now where we're at, and let's do a 5 year plan.
So I think the biggest word here is retention. I mean, whether it's teachers, employees, whether it's students, I mean, kids aren't just, a dollar sign. It's customer service. It's treating them like family. It's making them feel that they're wanted, they're loved here in this district, but it's also making the employees feel the same way. I see the information that was presented, and I mean, I guess I already know the answer, but I'm still gonna ask anyway. Why weren't we presented where we're currently standing right now with any of the information? Why does it just go back to the 23?
That's a good question, sir. The reason we cannot tell you what the fund balance is as of right now is it because the true fund balance number is the number only at the end of any given fiscal year. So if I gave you a number today, which we do give in our financial our updates, it is an approximate number. And we can give you an approximate number for right now, but it's gonna change from one day to another. We could get more expenses than revenues in one day, and it will fluctuate. So the true fund balance, as Mr. Gibson did say, that our auditor, he did say that number, after all of the closing entries, only then is it a final number.
And I understand that, but why? I mean, we talked about forecasting. Why can't we forecast that and still have an idea? This way the board, again, goes back to making a better sound decision, not bringing something to the board and saying, hey, you know what, actually this item, we already paid it out 3 days ago, but hey, we need you guys to approve it. I know that I've mentioned that quite a bit before, or hey, it's due today, and so pretty much it's, the board's hands are being tied and we gotta pretty much approve it right then and there. So it's just things like that where it doesn't give us adequate amount of time to get the right information. But again, going back to why weren't we presented this, everything that's where we're currently standing, I mean, there's still an estimation, approximation that could have. And again, how do we move forward if we're not even given that information? So we're only giving half the information, not everything for what it stands right now. So I personally, I don't like that. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but it's a blind side to us, and I personally don't like that.
That is, again, the information is part of the financial, the packet that's given on a monthly basis to the Finance Committee, and we can make sure that the board gets that on a monthly basis. It does have the fund balance delineated at the bottom of each of those funds, and we can make sure that y'all get that.
How many, can you at least tell me how many days on hand we're at right now?
At this point, no, sir.
So, Ms. Bettis, instead of talking about, we're talking about fund balance here, and we're gonna, this is probably, one of several budget presentations, and if we want to increase our fund balance, we're gonna do so by planning the budget, right? So if we come up with, I think total expenses in the presentation was just like $477.7 million. So if we come up with same revenues, 477.7, and we come up with the budget of 450 in expenses, then we can conclude that our fund balance will increase by 27.7, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So instead of talking actuals, because I understand you at any actuals are actuals at any given point in time. But once we develop a budget, can't we then be informed through a presentation here based on where we are against budget? So if we're at 50% of the year and we've spent 60% of the budget, we know we're not on a good track. However, if we're at 40%, so where are we along the way against the budget, which is going to yield us, whatever our target is to increase the fund balance. So it's the same question Mr. Barrera was asking. However, it allows us to know where we're going before we get there, because as long as we're disciplined and sticking to our budget,
Yes.
then we'll hit it. And then the discipline will be, okay, we got to stick to the budget. And if we deviate from it, well, then let's talk about the impact. Where is it going to come from? Because one of our objectives is to increase the fund balance. Is that an approach that we can take?
So when Ms. Gardea was asking about getting that information on a monthly basis, the report that I was referring to, I would work on it myself and I would tell you we are at X amount, exactly like you said, we are at 57% of spending. We should be at about 65. And then the same thing for our revenues. We are at 50% of our revenues. We should be at 45, so that you can estimate more or less where we are at that point in the year. That would be the report that I would be providing you with.
And I think it would be more helpful, though, if you could use budgetary numbers to estimate or to convey, because otherwise, to convey days cash on hand, making it clear that it's budget, because otherwise, we're trying to measure the temperature outside by feeling how cold the water is. It doesn't necessarily correlate. And so if we're not looking at days cash on hand based on, where are we supposed to be according to budget, et cetera, and where we are, then it's kind of difficult,
Right.
So if that could be one of the indicators that we're looking at in that report that you're describing, I think that would be helpful.
I think this is definitely a report that we should probably work on over the next few months to see if it's the right information that you need. If it's not, we can go back and do something else. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable with the information that we're giving you. So if it takes a couple of months, I am completely okay with that, but I do want y'all to be comfortable with that information.
I'm going to be frank. I think a couple of months, like you said, I'm going to use your own words against you, is anything can happen from day to day. So if we wait 2 months, what's not to say anything can happen in the next couple of months? So, proactively, I think we need to get this done as soon as possible, whatever that looks like. Maybe it might be those 4 weeks, but, just taking the extra 4 weeks just to get it done when it can be done in 4 weeks, I think that's where we need to sit. But, I want it done fast, but right.
Correct.
And that not fast and short change, and we get still incomplete answers. Part of it, I don't understand, like some of this doesn't make sense, but yet our charge increased, but then we did away with the sped clerks, which the sped clerks were the ones inputting that information, and that's how it helped generate, a significant amount of revenue, but yet I know that we're gonna get ready to deal with the shortfall of the federal funding for sped here shortly, so we're gonna have to still make up for that as well to provide the services that those kids need. How did you guys come up with we're saving $2 million annually just by switching to LEDs?
So based on the quotes that we got from the various vendors, they did say, okay, if you go with this plan, you will save X amount of money per vendor. And Dr. Carmen, go.
Yeah, there's a pre and post. They measure what the energy usage is on the fluorescent lightage. Engineering had to come in. So there's a prior to LEDs being there, and then a post. How much energy is being consumed by the LED lights? And you multiply that times the number of fixtures, times the number of buildings that we had renovated to LED. That's where those numbers came from.
But that also includes the amount of hours that it's being run, right?
Correct.
So these are actuals or these are projected of what they sold us on?
These are projected, but in
Okay.
a recent meeting, it appears as if it may be actually a little low. Our savings may be a little more than that.
Oh, good.
And we have some rebates pending, looking for David. We have some, for Carrasco, we have some rebates pending still for making those renovations. So there's a little bit of money in that first year we get back as well.
And then is this after all the LED is done, or is this where we're currently standing?
Does it include the PSI work? I don't recall.
The estimate includes, that was part of the estimates for everybody. So that was everything being done. The number we have right now that looks like it's going to be a lot higher does not even include the last part of the construction of those LED
Okay, so that's with 3 of the 4 phases done, because PSI just began their work.
Okay.
If
They're
I may-
supposed to do a report on the energy efficiency when they bid out for these lighting systems.
I'm sorry.
There's supposed to be a report that accompanies the bid from these companies to say, this is what we are going to produce, this is what we're going to save you.
All of those came as part of the bids, and I thought were included in the bid proposals to the board, but we can certainly
sir.
get those back out.
Yes, so you can. Just one more point, actually, because you potential solutions, evaluate maintenance of current district programs. We have to properly go in there and really evaluate the needs of these programs that we have. And be honest, not one of these, well, this is my kingdom, leave it alone. We have to be honest with it. Because we have to, in the end, we have to protect the employee and ensure we don't cut services to our children in the process. So if it's, yeah, it's nice to have, well, then, but we don't need it, we need to just cut it and move on, and, and start, tightening the belt. But we have to be honest. We just can't say, oh, they're not going to find out. Just let them deal with it. That stuff's enough, incomplete information in it.
I think this, and I know that this is one of many workshops that we're going to have, so I think collectively what I'm hearing is bring us additional information. For example, how can we increase revenue? Possibly increasing enrollment, I've heard, looking at programs. I don't know if we mentioned, positions, are there any that we could transition to federal funds? Because I heard that about 90% or 89% are local. Is there a way that any of those naturally fit into the federal funded positions? The other thing that I heard was, or I was going to mention, is grants. I know that in page 32, you all mentioned safety and transportation, possibly with a bond proposal, but those are, right now, they're grants that are available for all districts with high dollar amounts. I believe just yesterday or this week, Dodea came out with a large grant amount. Are we applying for all of these fundings? And if so, I think that helps us as a board knowing that we're doing everything to try to mitigate and increase the revenues. With Mr. Nájera, what he mentioned, and Mr. Barrera, how you're bringing information to us, I think is very critical. That way we're able to project and make informed decisions as we collectively move forward. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm just gonna add one more thing. I mean, when we question why we're losing a lot of students, I mean, you don't have to look any further. I mean, when a board member takes some of his kids out of the district, that's that's information you can tap into right there. And again, it just goes back to the word retention. It's a simple word, retention. What are we doing to retain employees and kids?
Dr. Carmen, so I know that certainly health expenditures is one area, but, I'm curious, how invested is our TPA, and do they partner with us? Certainly the premiums and the fundings that go into that plan are all based on utilization. And yet, I don't know, I mean, I would have to guess that our utilization has increased, but is it just because costs have increased, or is it because utilization has increased? And if it has, where? I know that we during the presentation, I asked questions about, are we going to provide education efforts? I know I constantly have to remind my family, please do not use those urgent care centers that say emergency, because if you have a true emergency, what they're going to do is call an ambulance, and then they're going to transfer you. And you're responsible for that ambulance service because you should not have, gone from that. I'm sorry, you're not responsible for the ambulance service. You're responsible for that urgent care. One of them, whether it is going to be the visit where you drove yourself to that clinic, to that urgent care center, or the actual emergency one, because an insurance company is not going to pay for both. And so trying to educate my family to tell them, okay, well, if you're going to go there, why not just wait to go see your doctor the next day? And if you truly have an emergency, then don't go there because they can't help you. Go to the emergency room, dial 911, have the ambulance call you. So it's things like that, proper utilization. Of course, that won't help our costs, but it is about proper utilization. So what are they doing to help us manage our costs appropriately? Is the clinic working? Do we have an opportunity to try and promote the clinic more? Because it's not being utilized at full capacity. So that's one aspect. I know the presentation says that 89% of our expenditures is employee salaries, but that leaves 11%. It's still over $50 million. At 11%, I think it's about 57 million. And I had a salesperson tell me a long time ago that you can meet your quota by having one big deal or having a whole bunch of little ones. So yes, we've got some big numbers we got to look at, but all the other numbers add up as well. Have we looked at any other programs, whether it be, and when we're looking at the financial statements, variation by, is it fund, function, even down to the department level? Have we looked at variation by, and I don't know what the threshold is. Is it 10%? Is it 50%? I know attorney's fees, of course, would be one, but how many others are there out there like that where we seriously need to consider, costs increase in this particular area by 50%? Is that something that we really need to be spending? Or are we going to find things that, we're investing in this program or in this particular area and nobody's using it? Or, I don't know. But are those opportunities out there? Maybe costs did go up mid-year and it's time, for an RFP because costs did increase significantly in a particular area that we weren't expecting. So I guess ultimately what I'm saying is, let's not neglect the other 11%. I like all the other ideas that have presented. Enrollment, let's find those 600 students. Let's look at utilization. But just, two other things that I'd be interested in observing.
Absolutely. I think we can bring that to the next workshop. I will just say anecdotally, we were looking, and it had been how many years, Mrs. Pettis, that we had increased like the per pupil funding that we give to the campuses. So I don't think we saw like right off the bat any noticeable increases. In fact, I think it's been flat for a number of years, but that's certainly information we can go more in depth into our next workshop.
Anything else? Forgot we have more things.
Mr. Nahida, I just want to make sure that we actively look at bringing back our students and maybe creating a plan and presenting that plan to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
It's first on my list.
Okay. We'll continue then with executive session. The meeting is to be closed to consider administrative recommendations for principal positions at Purple Heart Elementary School and Salvador H. Sanchez Middle School under Texas Government Code Section 551.074. The time is 6:56. The date is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. We're back in session. The time is 7:14. The date is still Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024, and we still have a quorum. Continuing with new business, consider approval of administrative recommendations, starting with Principal of Purple Heart Elementary School, Dr. Carmen.
Yes, sir. Thank you, President Nahara. Members of the board, administration recommends Gloria Aguirre to assume the role and responsibilities as the new principal of Purple Heart Elementary School.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve made by Ms. Macias, second by Mr. Barrera. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Item passes. Congratulations, Ms. Aguirre. Principal at Salvador H. Sanchez Middle School, Dr. Carmen.
Sir, thank you, President Nahara. Members of the board, administration recommends Lourdes Correa to assume the role and responsibilities as the new principal of Salvador H. Sanchez Middle School.
Motion to approve?
I second.
Motion to approve made by Ms. Gardea, seconded by Ms. Macias. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Against? Item passes. Congratulations, Ms. Correa. There be no further business before this board. The meeting is adjourned. The time is 7:15, and the date is still Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024.